I want to go to Matt Bradley. He is in Tel Aviv this morning, his time. Matt, talk to me about what the reaction has been so far there.
Well, we haven't heard much in the way of reaction. It's very late here, of course, but we are expecting that this is going to be very, very warmly received. I mean, the Israelis have been pushing President Trump to participate in these attacks on Iran, and Israeli people that I talked to really were expecting that the president would sort of pick up the mantle and finish the job. And, you know, even driving around on highways here in Tel Aviv, there are billboards saying, Mr. President finished the job with his picture on it. So this is going to be a majorly popular move. But at the same time, you know, this isn't the first time that President Trump has expanded his U.S. engagement in the Middle East, U.S. military engagement. You know, back in 2017, he fired missiles against the Assad regime in Syria, something that the Obama administration hadn't really been doing up until then. You know, he killed Qasem Soleimani, who was the head of the Quds Force, which is kind of the expansionist wing, the outside wing of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. So he did that, and you know, intelligence officials told him there was going to be blowback. I think a lot of this, as far as Israelis see it, is they just wanted the U.S. to come in with the bomb, with the one big bunker buster bomb to sort of finish the job at Fordo. And that's what we kept hearing Israeli officials saying. So the question then becomes, how much more skin is the U.S. going to be putting into the game here? A lot of Israelis just really felt like the bomb would be enough. But this seems to be, and over the past couple of days, we've seen this, that Israeli officials are talking more and more about regime change, as Richard Engel was pointing out earlier. This question of regime change leaves so much open, and we've seen in every theater that the Israelis have been engaged in around their borders ever since those October 7th attacks a year and a half ago, the Israelis have overwhelmed their opponents with military force, but have left nothing really in the way of a more permanent political solution. So we keep hearing Israeli politicians talking about regime change in Iran. They're not really discussing what's next. So it will be interesting to see what President Trump was told the Israeli officials, the Israeli government, thought will be coming next in Iran, and whether or not that actually matches up to reality. If the president thinks that the regime is on its last legs, or if the Israelis told him that, and that there is about to be regime change, and that means America's involvement will be very slight, that will be interesting. But I wonder if President Trump did get some assurances or some confidence from the Israeli government about what they thought would be the next step in Iran.
And Matt, you talked about this a little bit, but these last couple of years after October 7th, a lot of Israel's focus has been, yes, on directly destroying Hamas in Gaza, but then it destroying Iran's other group in the Middle East, where you have been so many times in Lebanon. The Hezbollah destruction of the infrastructure of that organization with those beepers and the walkie-talkies has been from A to Z. This is a different time for Iran as a consequence of October 7th and all of its allies.
That's right. Iran is substantially weaker, and not just because it's been hit by sanctions for decades. It's also weak because all of its proxies are weak. And that's what, when I mentioned Qasem Soleimani just a moment ago, Qasem Soleimani, who President Trump had killed back a couple of years ago, he was in charge of beefing up all of these different Iranian proxies throughout the region. So, as I mentioned, the Israelis have just been waging wars all around their borders for the past year and a half. But from an Israeli perspective, each one of these groups is just an extension of Iran. They see Iran's tentacles in just about every group surrounding them, and that's not necessarily unrealistic. We know that, especially with the case of Hezbollah across Israel's northern border in Lebanon, that was almost completely run by Iran. But each of these groups was a little bit different. And you're right, now they're so much substantially weaker that Israel can strike without worrying that all of these groups in close proximity to Israel's borders will fire back and punish its citizens. Now they can have confidence that none of this is going to happen. Hamas has been almost totally destroyed. Hezbollah has been almost totally destroyed. They're working very strongly on the Houthis in Yemen. And, of course, the regime of Bashar al-Assad in Syria changed. That fell. And now there's a leader there who's much more in touch and much more concerned about trying to help the West. But, here in Israel, this effort, this attack against Iran has an approval rating of over 80%. So that means that basically this is an enormously popular decision by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, despite the fact that 24 Israelis did die in Iranian retaliatory attacks, and despite the fact that so much of this country has been spending every night rushing to shelters, and that quite a few hundred people have been injured. It's been very scary for a lot of people. This was still an extremely popular move here in Israel. And so President Trump weighing in is going to be even more popular for the U.S. president. And this is, I want to also add here, this is also going to be vindication for Benjamin Netanyahu. One of the things he says over and over again to the public here is that he is expert at manipulating American presidents. It's actually something that he boasts about in his speeches.
And Matt, just to think that you and I were having a conversation just about an hour and a half ago on NBC Nightly News, and you were telling me that for the first time in a week, it seemed as though things were a little less intense overnight. My, how things have changed in over an hour and a half.
This is true. This is true. Yeah, I mean, we could see an Iranian response to this. I wonder if the response will be more targeted at American facilities, of which there are many in the Middle East, and that could be a very threatening ramp up of this war, especially because the United States has such a muscular presence throughout the Middle East. If the Iranians were to start firing missiles at American military installations, there's no telling what will stop that kind of escalation. So, yeah, this is a very dangerous moment, but one that the Israeli public is going to very much be cheering for.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.